Hi, and welcome to Saltgrass. Today we're live in the studio and we're back on the topic of organics in our waste system. A couple of weeks ago we had the Mayor, Toby Hayden, and Lucy Young from Yimby Compost in to discuss the proposed introduction of a curbside waste collection service for our food scraps and our garden waste, or a FOGO bin. Many councils have already introduced these services as the state government has set goals for a 50% reduction in organic waste going to landfill, originally by 2030, and now that target is by 2027, which is next year. This goal is really wonderful. As explained last episode, organics in landfill is a significant source of greenhouse gases, and so we do really want to reduce all of those garden scraps and kitchen scraps going into landfill. And if you missed the last episode on this topic, it's worth a listen. It's up on the Saltgrass website, which is saltgrasspodcast.com, and should be easy to find on your podcast app. So the curbside FOGO bins are just one way to manage a shire's organic waste, or should I perhaps call it organic byproduct or even a resource, depending on who you are. But there are other ways we could go about it, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Last time we heard how the FOGO system works with the bins collected by trucks, as we're all accustomed to with our recycling and our general waste, and taken to a facility, either locally or further afield, and then composted in inverted commas. But also, as we heard last week, this large-scale process is prone to contamination, and the finished result is often a poor quality byproduct that is not much good on gardens. So right now, our councillors are reading copious documents and getting their heads around whether to vote yes or no to introducing FOGO bins. They are yet to take it to a vote, and so it's a pivotal time for us all to get our heads around the proposed changes too. Yimby Compost have already submitted a petition to council of over 1,000 signatures of people who would like them to just go slow on FOGO, say no just for the minute, so that we can explore other options. And today I have two guests who know very well the two parts of our organic waste stream. Lucy Young from Yimby, the local composting group, and Anthony Jansen from Greenaway. And Greenaway is a local business that already collects garden organics, or GO, in the curbside bins. They both have lots of ideas about why the FOGO bins may not be the best solution for our shire and what we might do differently. And before we chat to these guys, I would like to acknowledge that Saltgrass is produced on Jarrah country, the home of the Dja-Dja-Wurrung. They've been zero waste ecosystem guardians and custodians of this land for countless generations, and they continue to lead the way and generously share their wisdom on how to live here better. I give thanks to them and honour elders past and present. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change.
Saltgrass.
Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com. Hi, Lucy and Anthony. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, good morning, Ali.
Hi. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate that we can continue this conversation. We had such a great chat with the Mayor and Lucy last time, and we just got to the end of the hour and it was like, but there's so much more to say. We would like to try and unpack some of that today. I thought we could start by looking at a little bit how people in our shire currently manage their food organics, or FO as we call it, and their garden organics, which is GO. And so Lucy, as part of the community composting group Yimby, you're very familiar with how people manage their food organics, and you've offered a solution for a lot of households already. And Yimby is already doing a lot of great work diverting food scraps from landfill. And Anthony, you're doing the GO bit, the garden organics. So what's your experience of how people are already managing their FO and their GO?
It's interesting that you ask this question now, I guess. Most of the petition signatures came from online, so we didn't really have a lot of interaction with people. We were getting messages throughout and responding. So gathering the petitions face-to-face in Maxi IGA and Wesley Hill Market and Castlemaine Farmers Market, we got to talk to a few hundred people that mostly ended up signing the petition. And we heard all sorts of amazing stories about the creativity with which people deal with their food organics. One that really sticks to mind is, 'cause we engage a lot of people in conversation because some weirdo approaches you in the supermarket and you go, oh, no thanks. And then you say, oh, have you got a minute just to talk about green bins? And I have to say most people said, oh, yes, I just got a letter telling me that Greenaway is going to stop. So, yes, I want to talk about this. And no thanks, I don't need one. I already compost and I already have Greenaway. And I'd say, okay, so you already compost, you put everything in your compost bin. And a lot of people said either yes or no, not quite. And the outliers will inevitably be citrus, meat, onion. I don't know where people got the idea that they couldn't put these in their compost, but anyway, it persists. And so then this one woman sticks in my mind because she said, I used to put my meat in the landfill bin. And then I thought, I know this is not good because I read about it in the compost conversation. So I thought, what can I do with that? She had a little chuckle and she said, I've got a big ant pile in my backyard. I now put it on top of my ant heap. The ants come along, eat all the meat off the bones, and then I put it in the bin. Is that okay? And I said, well, it would be better in your compost, but I think that's okay in landfill as well. So anyway, that's just one example. We heard many stories, many people saying, I already compost, or a guy that I'd never met before, Yimby had never met before, saying, oh yeah, I compost for 5 of my neighbours and I've got a good chipper, so I chip for 5 of my neighbours as well, and we get together every now and again and we do some composting, or I love composting, so I do it. So there are many ways in which people are already dealing with this stuff, but we don't know how many. These are like a couple hundred people that we talk to. We have also door knocked on a few thousand doors, and we have heard
in the process of getting people to
over the last
Yimby.
6 years, when a composter starts in their local area, they knock on doors and say, hey, I'm from Yimby Composting, I'm your neighbour, and would you like a bucket to put your food scraps in? And then a lot of people have said, no, I already compost, thank you. But then over 600 households now get the weekly pickup buckets, and 53 other composters. Some people only put their citrus and their onion peel and their bones in that bin, but it means it's not going into landfill.
Because they're composting at home.
Yeah, because they're composting at home.
Yeah.
Some people, you say, oh, thank goodness, because I can't compost anymore. I've had a knee reconstruction or whatever.
Or young kids. I know a lot of people, they would love to compost, but they've got young kids and they just don't have time or capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we unearth people, like it was actually through Anthony that we met a very innovative man in Malden, Oliver, who's designed this space age looking composting technology, and he's putting everything through that and is very keen to talk about how that works. And it's an amazing system that he does. So there's many ways that people are already dealing with their organics, but the point is we don't actually know exactly how many. We acknowledge that we haven't talked to everybody, and it's important, as you've outlined, that we really do get those organics out of landfill. It's actually one of the easiest things that we can do as a community to contribute to lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. The other part is, of course, businesses that the legislation doesn't address at all. There's no requirement for businesses, according to the state legislation, to remove organics from landfill. And the only option they have is to put it in the red bin.
And that's the general waste bin. And there's so many cafes and restaurants and food providers that would have a lot of organic waste, food waste.
And 25 have signed up to Yimby. It's not something we set out to do, but then they keep approaching us and we can't. Yes, it does create a strain on our system, but we're also really pleased to support their efforts to do the right thing.
So Yimby's already in some ways exceeding the requirements of the state goals for reducing organics to landfill just by addressing some businesses and their needs.
Yeah, and the other part that we do a little bit of and would love to see built into a Shire-wide system is also our events. We're not saying Yimby can do all of this. What happens when we have an event and there's X amount of bits of sausage and onion.
It's right,
and
the
all of
main
that.
game's coming up, Main FM's main fundraiser, and it's a
Yeah.
massive footy game, and there's going to be lots of sausages
Yeah.
and lots of little serviettes.
And there is a Wastewise events policy that council hosts, but it was promoted when it was first produced. But I guess time moves on and people forget. But wouldn't it be great every time you're planning an event that you have your waste plan incorporated into your event?
Yeah, great. And Anthony, you run the Greenaway service, which is a curbside service for people's garden waste.
That's all right, yep.
Yeah. How big is it? How many people utilise your service roughly
We've got nearly 2,000 bins
in the Mount Alexander
in
Shire?
Alexander Shire, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
There's 396 in Maldon alone.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Beautiful gardens in Maldon.
yes.
Tidy town.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, and so you've sent out a letter to a lot of your customers, which has alarmed them. I've had several of my friends message me because they knew I was talking about this topic, and they're like, I've just got a letter from Greenaway saying they're going to close at the end of the year because council's proposing to introduce the FOGO system. I guess there's two things there. First, the people who aren't using your organic waste service, I guess the question is, what are they doing with their garden waste? But also, I know that you have a really clean methodology, like you have a way of collecting things without getting the contaminants that so many FOGO systems seem to struggle with, is people putting in plastic and things that aren't compostable and the wrong sort of things.
We do our best to inspect it with the cameras in the trucks. When we see the plastics and rubbish go in, we stop the truck and pull it out.
So it's
And
quite
if-
labour intensive
Yes.
and careful, your
Yeah.
whole process. Yeah.
It is. And then sometimes it's too big to take out, so we leave it there, we take it out at the other end, but then every time we empty that person's bin again, we check them.
Yeah.
So we've got to jump out the truck and have a look at them.
And do you communicate with your customers if they've been...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because I think that is one of the problems, isn't it, is communication and clear education around what is able to be put in.
That's right.
And yeah, so the other idea that you mentioned last week, Lucy, was this idea of bounce, that once you introduce a FOGO service, everyone just goes, oh, I've got a bin for that. I'll just put all my garden waste in it. And suddenly you've got heaps more organic matter coming into the system that actually was being dealt with on the property previously.
Yeah, and I think John Meadows really dug into the statewide data, and the first thing to say about that is he found the data was lacking, but it is quite clear. And also there's experts locally that already knew of this phenomena saying once you give people a bin, they tend to fill it up. There's not a commensurate reduction in the landfill bin. Overall, what's coming out to the curbside from a household increases dramatically. And what we know from just anecdotally, again, we keep saying anecdotally, the point is we would love to do some more robust data collection. People say, okay, well, I used to just put the branches down the back corner, the leaves would fall off, they would dry out. I might use them for my fire, or they just sit in that back corner and over time it diminishes. And now they go, oh, well, put it in my bin because I've got one. There wasn't a problem before and now there is. And when there's pressing priorities, we seem to live in a time where people are generally really stressed. Then if there's something that they can just send away, then there's a propensity to do it. And I guess what we do know that there is no away. There's a consequence with everything that we send outside, and also specifically with organics, it is something that we need to keep in our local soils need. It's something that nature has always recycled back into nutrient. And we're sorely lacking that in the goldfields, where Indigenous people call it upside down country.
Where the mining process of the last century or two have completely destroyed the value of our soils and left us with hard-baked clay, which is so hard, and often contaminated soil. People do buy in soil and compost in large quantities so they can have their garden beds. It seems like a great deal of energy is spent in sending things away and then pulling it back in from somewhere else, when we could just, if we were managing things really well in our local shire, we could have it all in place.
And I guess at Gympie have learnt a lot from Anthony, again, really at pains to say we have to get this stuff out of landfill, but the environmental or ecological cost of that is not neutral. So Anthony's taught us lots about the impacts of trucks.
The impact of the trucks is the fuel costs and the running of the trucks and what the trucks are doing to the roads, especially in courts. We try not to turn around in courts. We try to back into them, and then we actually stop the truck in the middle of the court, jump out and manually bring all the bins to the truck, just because of what it does to the courts and what it does to our tyres. And being privately run, we've got to pay for those tyres. And then the effect of all the rubber you leave on the road that gets washed into the waterways.
Yeah.
There's the microplastics as well from the tyres. Actually, one of our biggest sources of microplastic pollution is from tyres. Yeah.
And so I guess the summary of this is, if we do introduce a FOGO system, not only will there be more trucks servicing the whole shire to collect their FO and their GO, but also if we do see some bounce, there will be even more stuff moving, which didn't move before, is unnecessary to move. The people who really want to get their organic waste from their properties are already contracting green away. And there's a lot of very happy customers, it seems, because they're very upset by the idea that you might close.
It's a bit unfortunate, yes.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about your business and how you're looking to the future of your business and how the introduction of a FOGO bin might impact you and the decisions you're making about your business.
Yeah, we've made a decision to close the business down because of the FOGO. It's when they're going to start. In Bendigo, we kept going, but we ended up with almost a kilometre between bins. It's just not worth picking them up after they introduce FOGO. Because people have been asking us, if we keep going, they'll stick with us. But how many?
Yeah.
The numbers are still really not quite high enough to run it properly now. So we're still trying to get it. We were trying to get it higher. We stopped putting new services out because the time it takes to wash bins, take them back down again, and then only to pick them up again in December.
Yeah, and so it's a real crunch point for you. What council decides really impacts your business entirely. Yeah.
And the two owners are getting on a bit.
Yeah. But even if you were to retire, if the FOGO system was not in place, you'd be able to sell your business on.
That's right.
As a viable option for someone else to run.
Yeah, we've looked at it, we're trying to sell it, but everyone knows that something's going to happen because it's been statewide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tricky one. And then, Lucy, the other side of it is YIMBY, of course, the impact that it'll have on community composting. And I know you've got examples in mind of other communities where they had a pretty robust composting community and that was undermined by the introduction of a FOGO bin.
Yeah, I guess it's that thing again of when there's something that's very convenient, which is a real advantage of FOGO, to have just a bin you can chuck something in. But we've heard multiple stories, including one comes to mind that Michaela was talking with someone whilst collecting a signature, and the woman, she was actually from Melbourne because it was at the market and a lot of people from Melbourne there. She said that, yes, now they do have the FOGO bin and it's worked really well in inner city Melbourne. And Michaela said, what did you do before? And she said, I just used to compost everything. And Michaela said, oh, okay, so you don't compost anymore? And Michaela said that this woman's eyes just went, oh, I used to love composting.
Yeah.
And now I'm not doing that. And yeah, I mean, she'd be doing something else with that time, but it's that very low impact solution where people are, if we broaden the lens out to the wellbeing economy, health, and all of the other things, you know, we're very much focused on the waste lens. But if we look at how we're spending our lives and how we're contributing to just cycling those nutrients and what impact it has on the soil and what impact it has on us. I did want to say that Anthony's doing an amazing job with 2,000 households. We're currently doing 600. There's 8,500 households that get a bin in this shire, and some of them will be putting organics in landfill. We know that some of them are putting organics in landfill. So we need to figure out a system that will work for everyone, work for reducing emissions, but also be a resilient system that can go into the future knowing that we're bringing systems into existence that can withstand many of the things that we're forecasting or being afraid of what's going to happen. I think we know that there's going to be a difficult future.
Climate impacts.
Climate impacts, yeah. And it's not something that at Yimby we have ever led with. It's very much a climate action that we design this with, but we really recognise that we don't actively talk about climate change because it's a very fearful place.
A lot of people switch off.
A lot of people switch off. It's too hard to actually contemplate. But there are times such as now when we need to think about that, I think.
Yeah, that is definitely part of the equation.
So, yeah, how do we scale up, I think, is
And
one
we
of the
could-
things that we wanted to talk about.
Yes, we definitely will. We'll do that in a minute.
Yep.
I do have two examples from my own life. Two families that I know in Melbourne have had their councils roll out the FOGO. One is my mother, and she just composts still in her own backyard and doesn't use her bin at all. And she lives in a little enclave of units, and they're all quite connected. She's been talking to them about introducing a Yimby-like system where they all compost together in this communal way. So I feel like that's a really lovely possibility for them. But then another family I know in Melbourne have got the FOGO service, and they've used those little plastic bags that come with the caddy that sits in the kitchen that are supposedly compostable, but I think we're finding out that they're not very compostable actually in the end. And it's a family of 4, and between them, no one wants to take responsibility for that little compost caddy in the kitchen. So it sits there, gets too full, it gets stuffed with stuff. No one takes it out to the bin because the bag ends up breaking because it's sat there too long. Yeah. They've ended up just completely disregarding their FOGO bin. I think they put their garden organics in it, but not their food scraps. So their food scraps are still going into their kitchen bin, their regular waste bin, and it's only their garden organics that are going to the FOGO bin because it's too icky for them. And as a family, they haven't figured out how to roster that as a chore or something. I don't know. But also, reflecting on that, I was thinking that's one of the real benefits of the Yimby system is that the Yimby composters wash the buckets and give it back to the household each week. That is a service that FOGO does not offer. That, to me, I think is a large reason why a lot of people don't want to compost, because it's got the ick factor of cleaning a bucket that gets a bit slimy and starts smelling. And there's arguments in-house about enough things already, dishes and who vacuums, who cleans the bathroom, and which way does the toilet paper go on the roll. You don't need another thing to argue about. You know?
Ali, I did want to pick up on something you said,
Yeah.
and that was about the compostable bags. One of the things we've been at pains to do in this petition is to not spread inaccurate information. So they are compostable. I think the point is that it's not the bags, it's the knots. Once you have a mechanised system, then you need consistency, but not all of the mechanised systems are consistent. And actually, this is part of the thing that we've been picking up on with the state government framework. The service standards initially said every household should be offered a caddy with a compostable bag because it makes it cleaner, except for when they break, because actually they biodegrade even sitting in your drawer.
Yeah.
They're very thin bags as well.
And they do break down. Air breaks them down. But now the second draft of the service standards actually have banned the use of them in the system. So I guess the point is there is no clarity about the best way of doing this on a large scale. And I guess the point that we come to is how can this relatively small community deal with it? So it's not about how the whole world is going to deal with it, which is where we're increasingly pushed into just one size fits all, but how can we deal with it? What's the best way of dealing with it here that makes sense and is simple and is resilient?
That's brilliant. And that is what we want to talk about for the rest of the show, all the different possibilities that we can maybe come up with around both FO and GO. There's a lot we can talk about in terms of what can be done, but it's also, a lot of it's already being done, isn't it? A lot of the systems are already in place and people are already managing their garden waste, as you said, Lucy.
There's gardeners that are taking stuff to the transfer station. There's neighbours that are helping each other out with trailers. Before bushfire season, people take clean-up stuff to the tip to be mulched there. There's now a mulcher there. And acknowledging it isn't enough. There is still stuff going in landfill, so I don't want to shy away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I guess the second half of the show I'd like to be kind of like a discussion in imagination, really, of how we can do it. And also there are, as you said, really strong reasons why it's important to help householders do this stuff because not everyone has capacity to manage their properties or their waste streams as much as other people. And I am that person who never mowed my lawn and got notices from council every year about if I didn't mow it, they'd come and mow it for me.
Bonus.
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the garden waste. Let's start with that. We could have the Green Away service still running to the people who do want things removed, but also we could have, I think Lucy and the Yimby team have suggested this in the past, a street-by-street chipping service.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that one of the reasons that we have lots of conversations with Anthony is not because we're just in there trying to save his business, but because being able to talk to a waste contractor, because he's an owner-operator, is gold. And every time we've talked with Anthony, he's a business owner, but he's also passionate about waste. And we have these generative conversations about the way things could be. And one example of that is that, yeah, we'd love to trial, and we've talked with some local arborists that say, we actually already do this for some people already. Some people contact us and say, can you just swing past with your big chipper, because we used to have a chipper and you take your life into your hands often with household level chippers, and just chip our branches and prunings, and then we'll take them back into our garden or take them away. But we'd like to have a go at systematising that, and we've got a basic model sketched out where the arborists say, okay, we'll have a booking system like once a fortnight, or the trial would actually be something like, let's in this geographic area offer, you can book in to have our truck come past on a specific day, and you can choose to have your garden mulch back into your own garden once it's been through our high quality chipper, or we'll take it away for you. That might be a funded trial initially, or it might be a user pays, and we do need to talk about the equity of all of these systems. But yeah, and then when you've got the chipped materials, you're not transporting a whole lot of air that Anthony wouldn't like. He's talked about the costs of transporting stuff, but a lot of it's air in your truck, isn't it, that you're...
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. We also offered a service where we would drop 6 bins off to people and then empty them twice for them for a cost for when they had a big clean-up. And that was used a lot.
Yeah, great.
And so within that, there's a curbside trial, but there's also, so currently Anthony's, and I know I'm trying to pull information out of you, Anthony, because we've had such wonderful conversations, like the idea of being able to, whilst you live in Bendigo and your trucks live in Bendigo, about bringing them local.
Yes.
Yeah. And being able to contribute to maybe some on-farm trials. We've had 4 farmers that have contacted us, and we haven't taken it any further as yet because we don't want to set up trials of things if FOGO's going to come in and people lose their motivation and inspiration. But if we can have the garden organics picked up, chipped in the Shire and then redistributed.
That would be great to be able to do that and find somewhere where to bring it local. We could actually leave the trucks down here, the cost savings in the fuel and the wear and tear on trucks and the environment.
Yeah, so keeping it as local as possible and taking it to people who actually will use it well and then get a good quality product at the other end of it. And I guess the context of all of this that we're discussing, these potential future ideas of how we could stream all of these different products and byproducts of our gardens and our homes, is if the council's got a budget to implement FOGO, then they could subsidise or support other initiatives, and council could run a chipping service. And I'm imagining like when they had hard rubbish collections back in the day, they would say, your street is having it at this time, and everyone would just get their stuff out onto the nature strip, and then they could just do street by street and book it in that way.
I might even slightly disagree there, because I think that one of the things that we talk a lot about at Yimby is actually not trying to say this is council's problem. This is our shared problem. This is, how do we do this as a community? How do we introduce changes? Whatever happens between now and 2030 or 2027, as you said, is the preferred target, is going to require engaging the minds, perhaps the money, and the organisational and imaginative skills of the community. Council is one, actually in this Shire, really small organisation with so many competing needs that they need to attend to. Yes, there is a waste reserve because council accumulates the rates and the waste charges from that. So there is a pool of money there. But I think one of the things that I was most excited to talk about does come from how we actually go into a future and draw on the imagination of this community. And it's not only the imagination, but the expertise and skills that we know live in this community as one of the most highly educated, underemployed community, I think the census tells us. And drawing on, if we recognise from the International Panel for Climate Change that we need to make really rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society if we've got any chance of making a real difference. And then people like Rob Hopkins and Naomi Klein talks about believing that imagination is the only thing that we have that is radical enough to make a difference, and it has to be accompanied, of course, by bravery and by action. So how do we support our council to be brave, to trust the community, and to try actions that we haven't tried before is something that we're very interested in. And so that's why our core messages has been, who do we need to bring together to do the work, to imagine the system? Yimby's imagined one part of it, and we do keep imagining other parts of it, but we can't take the action on everything. But we know that there are others, like there are small business owners like Anthony that can imagine his small part of it. There are farmers that can imagine their small part of it. There are, your Olivers in Malden that can imagine his small part of it. How do we bring what we know is the majority of people? There's other research that we base our confidence in, which is there's a global project called the 89%, and that refers to between 80 and 90% of people are really concerned about climate change and also are willing to take action. So it's up to local areas to imagine what that action is and to be able to implement that action locally and trust that we can do this. And what we find is these big systems like FOGO are actually aimed at the lowest common denominator. All their planning goes towards the people that are perceived as not doing the right thing. And so we're not putting energy into the large majority of people that are willing to do the right thing and how those people can then pull the rest of the system along. So we really want to get into a generative space. We've got a list of people that are experts in waste, experts in transport, experts in communication, how we get messages out. And council's one small part of that and a really critical part of that. And so how do we actually work together on this? And yeah, I'm a community development worker, so of course that's my bent, but I also think it's one of the most critical things, and that the research says in all of the climate literature and the scientific literature as well, that how we collaborate and how we imagine a future together is one of the most important things that we need to do.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you ask a lot, how do we? So how do we? Do you
Exactly.
know? Do you know? Do you have ideas about how that would look, and also how council could choose that in a responsible way so that they can tell state government they're taking solid action and that our shire will be doing our best to meet those goals? And what role can council play in making that decision in a really concrete way so that it's meaningful? Do you have a sense of that?
I don't want people to have the sense that we're talking about just having a big talk fest, because of course Yimby is continuing to grow during this time. Hopefully the garden organics is still being picked up and processed, and each system is growing individually, but we've got some very skilled people in this community that have done future thinking work. And if we have that group of people, we've got really local working towards a deliberative engagement. Deliberative engagement is actually a required part of local government these days, but we actually don't know how to do it, and it's seen as costly because it's a process where you take people on a journey to actually hear from everyone and then work out how you take action. But I know that there are examples across the globe of people that have engaged in this stuff, imagine a future, and then creating that. The more people you have that come together and get to the same page, then the quicker things can happen.
And I think one thing with this is it's all well and good for people who know about this stuff and understand to invite people in and do that process, but to actually reach the whole community and communicate effectively with the whole community and build a culture within our shire of people caring about this stuff, managing it willingly rather than grudgingly.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people get another bin, it's on their rates, they resent it a bit, they're just like, whatever. They don't want to think about it. I think part of what you're talking about is bringing the whole community along, and it's probably not a quick process either.
No, but in my imagination, it's not as slow as we might think. We saw a huge response to the fires recently. So many organisations that came together, and that's what happens at times of disaster, that people can come together really quickly. We saw a massive gathering of energy around declaring a climate emergency, and those things went across multiple organisations, from football clubs to environmental clubs to a Rotary Club to the sustainability group. You know, we brought a number of groups on with some clear messaging about what we're doing now, what they can do. It sounds messy and it's complicated because life is, but we also know that it's possible. Climate action is not necessarily the common purpose. In this instance, it's about what if we can design the best organics local system that is possible. Asking those what if questions that are generative, that's the place of coming together. And then there are many people that have opinions and ideas on that. And then there's also skilled facilitators that can synthesise that and then apportion resources where they're needed.
Yeah. And I think that one of the strengths of the YIMBY model, as I understand it, is that it actually does allow people who have the energy and will to compost are helping their direct neighbours who don't have the energy or will or capacity to compost. And all you need is 1 out of 14 people actively working on it within a neighbourhood. And suddenly the food organics problem is a lot of these things, if you talk about them in the abstract, it sounds unachievable potentially, but it can be very achievable if you just find the right people to really make it come alive.
And I mean, maybe Anthony might have a chance to say something here. I know that you had some amazing ideas about how you could minimise the impact of trucks in terms of the courts and in terms of bringing bins.
Yeah, there's lots of roads in Mackenzie Hill, Woodman's Drive. You've got to drive in right round the outside, then you've got to turn around and go back the other way. If everyone put all their bins on the same side, which is really just a matter of me asking them to do that. And in a lot of other roads that you go up and down twice, when you really only have to go down once if everyone put their bin across.
Yeah, simple things like that.
Simple things.
Simple things, yeah.
And courts, so you put them all on one side in a line, so your truck backs in, empties them all.
Yeah.
Or even bringing them up to the top of the court so you don't
Yes.
have to go in the court work. And also, there might be someone there that can't do that because they're...
Yeah, all they have to do is let us know. We
or talk to their neighbour. Yeah. There are already people that talk to their neighbours and get them to take their bin out.
have some elderly customers where we get their bin every week for them. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where if it's a local service, like you guys are local and you're part of this community, often if it's a bigger contractor that drives halfway across the state with whatever it is, which what we see with our recycling, and it probably won't be that way if we get a FOGO bin, but the level of care you guys show with the cameras in the bins and managing the contamination as you go and then offering those sort of kindnesses to elderly people or people with limited mobility, it's just a different level of community engagement, really.
It's nice having where we take our stuff to, saying they're not worried about any of our stuff because they know it's been cleaned before it gets there. And a couple of times you'll see something go in, and when we dump it, we go and look for it. So we take it out of the system.
Yeah, and so that's just another example of how a more local system and a more sort of careful way of doing things can solve some of those problems that the big FOGO systems have encountered with contamination and lots of plastics going in and things like that, which you guys avoid.
And if they didn't do a FOGO system and were able to set up somewhere on a farm to do the composting and everything, then everyone can. They don't have to have one of our bins. They can go there themselves. They don't have to go to the landfill.
Yeah, there could be multiple drop-off points.
Station.
Yeah. There's lots of good solutions, and we do only have a few minutes left, so we might need to wrap up here. But yeah, I thank you both. And I know there's so many more ideas out there, and I'm sure people listening are thinking, oh, what if they did this? So I think now's the time, to talk to the councillors because they are about to vote on FOGO, and if you have opinions and ideas about it, the YIMBY petition is closed, but it doesn't mean you can't contact your local councillor and tell them what you think about this stuff. And also politely, of course, because they're just doing their best and they do have a lot on their plate, and it's a really big issue that they're trying to get their head around. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you both so much for coming on. I appreciate your input and your ideas about all of this. It is a big topic, and it's one that's important, I think, for us to get our heads around.
Salt of the earth. Salt. Grassroots. Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change.
Saltgrass. Listen to all episodes of Saltgrass on your podcast app or at saltgrasspodcast.com.